Good morning. My name is Wolfgang Krosky. I'm the CEO of the Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce, and we are here today in a series of interviews with candidates that are running for the Pittsburgh Unified School District. We have with us Heliodoro Moreno, who is an appointed incumbent, and we have quite a few questions for him. But this is one of many. We are interviewing as a chamber every candidate for the school board, and we're also going to be interviewing candidates for the Mount Diablo School Board because Pittsburgh does cover both school districts. So if you live in the Oak Hill, San Marco area, we do have some candidate interviews that will cover that area as well. So we're really thankful for this opportunity. And first off, just want to give you some time to introduce yourself and tell everybody a little about you and your history.
Yes, thank you, Wolf. First, I want to thank the Chamber of Commerce and you for doing these interviews. I think it's very important for the community to hear from us. And just as Wolf said, my name is Heliodoro Moreno. I was raised here in Pittsburgh, graduated from Pittsburgh High School in 1999. Moved around a lot here in Pittsburgh, so I attended several of the schools, both Central and Hillview, also Village, Highlands, and Foothill. After I went off to the military, I served 5 years in the U.S. Marine Corps, and then I went off to law school. I came back to Pittsburgh because this is the city that I love. I bleed orange and black, and I always wanted to settle here with my family. And now I've been an attorney for over 11 years. I own a home here with my wife and our 4 children. I have 3 daughters that now go through our district here in Pittsburgh Unified. And for me, I always wanted to get involved in our district and became active as a parent on several committees here, the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee, the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee, and also served on the English Learners Advisory Committees, both at my daughter's elementary schools and then in the district. Before I was appointed to the school board, I served as vice president and then president of the district's English Learners Advisory Committee. And for me, it's very important to be very involved in the education of our children, but I also have a vested interest here in the education in Pittsburgh. Like I said before, I really love Pittsburgh. And I really want to make sure that all of our students really have all the opportunities to reach any dream that they have. I think that that's extremely key, and I think we can do that here in Pittsburgh. So I'm looking forward to being elected to a full 4-year term.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your service. I
Absolutely.
come from a military family, and my one brother, he's
Yes.
a Marine, so I appreciate that. So,
Absolutely.
first question we want to start with are what do you feel are the needs of our students? Because it's the whole point of the school board is to do the best for our students. So I think
Right.
it's appropriate to start there.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And the reason I'm running is for our students. I want to make sure to give them every opportunity that they deserve. I think first and foremost, we have to understand that these past few years have been extremely difficult because of the COVID pandemic. We spent 2 years in distance learning, which really affected our students in many different ways. So I think one of the things that we clearly need is that we need to serve the entire child. And we need to start with social emotional support. We need to make sure that our students receive that support, because if they're dealing with problems outside the home, dealing problems that affect their mental health, their social emotional development, then they're not going to be able to focus on schoolwork. They're not going to be able to do homework. They're going to act out in different behaviors. And we need to make sure to give them the support so that they can focus in school. I think that's first and foremost. Above that, I think we need to give our students diversity in pathways. Make sure that they have many different opportunities to reach whatever goals that they have. Not only do we have to provide rigorous AP programming and really make sure that we provide our students with all the classes that they need to attend college, but we also need to give them a career and technical education pathway. We need to make sure that we partner with Los Medanos College, with different unions to provide apprenticeship programs for our students that want to take that track. But also one other thing that we've never really had here in Pittsburgh is really bring JROTC into Pittsburgh. I think that that would be huge. As a Marine veteran, I really loved my experience in the military. It taught me a lot. And I think that that's something that can benefit our students. Give them another opportunity. If students that want to approach that, my brother also joined the Marine Corps. We always have a large number of students that join the military, and let's give them that opportunity to see how it is
So
before
for
they join.
those that don't know JROTC, what exactly is it, and what is
Yes,
that?
absolutely. It's a great program. The one that we're looking at is run by the Army. And what they do is that there's programming throughout the year where our students take a class instead of their gym class. They take JROTC and they go through training. They do drills, they do conferences, they learn about the military, they get taught discipline, tact, different things that you learn in the military so that then they can go through their process of learning those skills that they have in the military as high school students.
And correct me if I'm wrong, when somebody completes JROTC, they are at a little bit higher level when they get into the military, correct? They
Oh,
don't start at ground bottom.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But even if they don't go straight into the military,
Mm-hmm.
it gives them those skills, and there's a greater percentage of students that end up going to college when they join JROTC, right? Because obviously you need a bachelor's to become an officer, and many of them want to go down that track instead of enlisted. So really, that's something else that I think is important to provide to our students, and that's something that I'm supporting, and hopefully we can institute here soon here in Pittsburgh. Yeah. So I think that those things are extremely important for all of our students, but also provide a variety of tutoring support for our students too. We talked about social emotional. Now we need to talk about actual academics, right? And we need to make sure that we have the tutoring programs in many different facets, in person, online, to provide after school, during school, really to provide our students with those resources so that when they need assistance, have that assistance. I know that you're going to talk that we're probably going to talk about parents and family, but I think that that's an important component, and I'll talk more about that then. But for our students, it's providing that diversity, providing that social emotional support, and really focusing on our students that need additional needs. For example, our special education students, our English learner students, our foster youth. We need to make sure that they have all the services that they need, and we need to make sure that we're providing them the services that's required by law at all times. I think that that's extremely important. We need to focus on that and really push that with all of our groups that are more vulnerable, because one of the biggest things for me is my philosophy is we need to meet our students where they're at and then bring them up. Okay? And to me, that's the definition of equity. And that's very, very important to me, one of my priorities. And I think that part of that is meeting our special education students wherever they're at. We need to provide an emphasis on push-in services to bring our students to the general education. But then some students, that might not be the best for them. So we need to provide them the services wherever that they can best learn. One of the other things too that I think is extremely important, we need to make sure to avoid over-identification of our students. We need to make sure that they're evaluated properly so we're not getting an enormous amount of students being pushed. Oh no, they're having difficulty, so they must have a learning disability or some other disability, and thus their special education. I think that that's another problem that we need to work on, continue to work on, so that we can provide our students the accurate services that they need.
We definitely see that with male students being over-identified for special ed because they have too much energy, right? They're just
absolutely, absolutely.
There must be something wrong. So now, follow-up question on you mentioned meeting students where they are and filling the holes as best as possible. Do you feel that it's the district's job to try to meet all of those needs, or the district to identify groups and resources that can fill those needs?
I think it has to be a combination of both, Wolf. I think that it's very important for our district and our staff to identify these needs. And there's some responsibility, both legally and just if we want to achieve academic excellence, that our district has to take some of the responsibility to educate our students. But also, we need to provide resources, and parents need to also be actively engaged in their students' education. They need to take responsibility as well and be involved. And whatever the district cannot provide, then ask for those resources so that they can then go to the different avenues. And then for our school, it's very important to create those partnerships, Wolf, with different outside organizations to have that information for our parents. Because a lot of times our parents don't know where to go even if they want to. So I think having those resources is extremely important, but it really has to, there's no one size fit all, of course, but we need to have a combination of things to best support our kids.
And I ask that because some parents feel that it's the school's job to provide academics, and when the school starts doing more on the let's feed them, clothe them, make sure they have medicine, that it dilutes the district's primary responsibility of academics. And so
right.
What's your counterpoint to that, or do you agree with that, or just what's your...
No, I mean, I understand that concern, but the way I look at it is that if our students, aren't receiving those basic needs, then they're not going to be focusing on academics, and they're not going to be learning in the classroom. And not every student has those issues. So maybe there are some parents that aren't dealing with that. They're saying, well, is that taking away resources from my child? And I don't believe it is. I think that it's benefiting that child, because those children are in the classroom with other students that are also struggling, Wolf. And what ends up happening is when you have those issues, and there may be disruptions in class, and that's going to affect the education of all of our students. So what we need to do is we need to not only provide services, but provide the different resources so they can get outside services, so that our students, when they come into the classroom, they can be focused, and and then it creates a much better learning environment for all of our students. When all of our students are engaged in the course material, that benefits the students that may not be struggling social emotionally, because then you're having a productive discussion and you're not dealing with a bunch of different issues. So that's the way I look at it, and that's why I think it's very important to help provide those services as well.
Absolutely. I was a middle school teacher in Antioch Unified for several years, and I saw, when you have a student ranging from just having a bad day to they're having systemic issues, that their needs aren't being met, and how that impacts the learning of all the students in the classroom. So definitely meeting those needs is important. Now, you talked about families and parents. What parents in Pittsburgh Unified do you feel their needs are not currently being met? And then the follow-up question was, what do you plan to do about that?
Right. I think that there's a lot of parents that their needs aren't being met. I think it's special education parents. I think it's, in certain aspects, English learner parents, African American parents. I think one of the things that is very, very important to do, like I mentioned before, is to meet students where they are, but also we need to provide the resources to the parents so that they can come in, educate them. One of the things that's very important is, another thing that's very important for me is early literacy. I think that that's the gateway to the rest of education. And so for me, one of the things that's very important is that parents play a critical role in all of education, but particularly early literacy, because the early literacy I'm talking about is starting from when the child's in the womb, Wolf, reading to that child since then. Okay, and then as they come out, going through pictures with them, but also learning. Some parents aren't all on the same level. But we need to understand that anything assists. Opening a book, showing pictures, and describing, even if it's not reading something, is beneficial to the kids.
Or just having books in the home, period.
Exactly, exactly. So that's very, very key, and that's an educational process. That's why I'm also on the NorCal Gateway Rotary, and one of the things we do is we have a program called Pittsburgh Reads. Before I joined the board, I presented with Mr. Mims. We presented a resolution at the Pittsburgh Unified to join in partnership with Pittsburgh Reads, so that we can go ahead and emphasize these programs. That's what I want to continue to do, but also within our schools, provide that additional resources to our students as they're going through. Obviously, we're getting expanded TK and kindergarten, which is extremely important, trying to get more of our kids into preschool, but also providing the additional supports to pull out students that need assistance with early literacy is also extremely important. But for me, getting back to our parents, I really feel that what we need to do is we need to listen to our parents first and foremost. I think that's extremely important. One of the big things that I always try to describe is communication, communication, communication. But communication, a lot of times when people hear that, they feel it's like, oh, us communicating with them. It's like, oh yeah, well, we have all these different means. We have, we send text messages, we send emails.
Well, you guys have means.
Yeah. So there's means for us to communicate. So it's there, but it's not just that. It's not just a one-way street. It's a two-way street.
You're not a mind reader, and you don't know what the parents are thinking. Huh?
Absolutely. And so one of the keys for me is to get that information from our special education, from our English learner parents, from our African American parents. One of the things that assists with that, for example, I described how I was on the district's English Learners Advisory Committee. That's a great way. We had a representative from each school that attended these meetings, and we got perspectives from our different schools of these parents about what's affecting our students. What do we need to provide them so that we can lift them up? I think that that's very effective. The district is now starting a African American Parents Advisory Committee. I think that that's another great thing, because what that does is that's also going to bring parents together. The first meeting is going to be September 29th. And I think that could be a way to go. Well, do we have a special education one? No, we don't. And I think that that would be something to very clearly look into. Let's get parents that are in special education so that we can get their frontline opinions, advice, suggestions. They're the ones living through it with all of these students. I think that that would be a great way to bring that information in. And we have it for these other groups. Let's do it for special education as well.
So, you bring up different groups. I think everybody's familiar with those subgroups of the general
Mm-hmm.
student body. But I think there's also one group that often gets left out, and that's the 2.0 kid. Some schools call them the bubble kids,
Right.
whatever. But the student who's just doing just good enough,
Mm-hmm.
they're not, super talented maybe in athletics, or they haven't been identified as super talented.
Right.
They're not on, in any AP classes. There's nothing quote unquote special about them. They're just your average student, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes those students and those parents feel like there's nothing for me. How
Right.
What's your message to the parents that feel that way?
Right. Well, one thing I think is that we need to engage our parents and bring them in and let them know that you don't need to be satisfied with whatever situation that your
Mm-hmm.
student is facing, whether it's a 2.0, 3.0, whatever the situation is. If you feel like there's more that your student can do, I think one of the things that's very, very important for our parents is then to engage with their teachers, engage with their staff. There are resources that can be provided to help them. Mastery Center at the high school, the different tutoring centers to up their grades, have those teacher conferences with their teachers, ask those questions. I think that that's very important. But then also for us, I think it's important to engage our parents as a district and provide them more information, not just for students that are struggling, but for any students who want to raise their grades, who want to do better. I think these are the myriad of ways that we can do that. Sometimes it's identified as struggling,
Mm-hmm.
and you might not identify, oh, they're passing, they have that 2.0, so they're not struggling. Well, it's like, do you want to improve your grades? Do you want to reach a level that is more likely to benefit you when you go try to apply to a college, whether it be a CSU or a UC? Obviously, having a 3.0 or above increases your chances of getting into these schools. So trying to message that way so that we can provide those services to our students, I think can be very, very important, because complacency does happen. And that's a two-way street as well, Wolf. So I think we need to meet both sides, both from the district and from our parents.
Yeah, I agree. Now, obviously, no organization's perfect.
Absolutely
What do
not.
you feel is the number one challenge facing Pittsburgh Unified School
Mm-hmm.
District, and what are you going to
Mm-hmm.
champion as far as addressing
Right.
that issue or challenge?
So, I mean, the district has touted our graduation rates, which have gone up considerably since we were at Pittsburgh High
Yeah.
School. But graduation rates don't tell the whole story, Wolf. You look at our test scores at competency at grade level, it's between 30 and 40%, probably closer to 40%. But that really isn't sufficient. We want not only our students to graduate, but we want them to graduate at competency level that they should be at in the 12th grade. So I think really champion greater competency for our students. And you mentioned how I'm going to do that. Well, I think one of the ways that we do that, and this is more of a longer term goal, of course, is just like I mentioned earlier, that early literacy. Because if you read at grade level by third grade, Wolf, that totally changes your perspective going through all the way through your educational journey. That's a longer perspective, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But how about the students that are beyond third grade now, right? So that makes it a lot more difficult. But I think it's not impossible. And then I think that's where we provide that myriad of different supports that I was describing to you in many different ways, whether it be tutoring, social, emotional, from many different avenues, so we can get those students up to the level that they need. And I think that that's critical. And thankfully, we have the ELOP program that was recently funded by the state that provides additional funds for after school programming, which I think is very good, because it provides, I think that that's a way that we can provide additional supports for our students in many different aspects, not just educational, so that then we can try to get our students up. I think that's one of the biggest obstacles. But tied to that, and this might be an issue for all districts, is our financial health. That's extremely important to me. One of my other priorities is accountability. And for me, I think part of that is fiscal responsibility, Wolf. I think it's extremely important that we make sure that we're funding our schools as appropriately as we can. Part of that is out of our hands, of course, because it depends on the state. So one of the things that I want to do is I want to be an advocate as part of the school board to the state to increase funding. They did some of that this year, but that needs to increase. A lot of things that they did was one-time funding. We need to make it so it could be the ongoing funding that increases, which did increase, but it needs to increase even more. Especially, and that's not just the state, but the federal. As you may very well be aware, our federal government committed to funding 40% of special education, but they only fund like 6-7%. They need to meet the promise, right? So I mean, that's difficult to do, but being an advocate, I think that that's one component that needs to happen. Aside from that is we have a lot of one-time funding, ESSER 1, 2, and 3, which is funding given by the state and federal government due to COVID. That's going to be ending. 1 year already ended at the end of this past year. The next is going to end in the next 2 years. We need to make sure that whatever we're funding in those sources is adequately attributed for once we get out of that funding, so that we're not immediately cutting positions, programs for our students and then leave them there hanging. So that's going to be very, very important. And it's not going to be easy, Wolf, but that's why one of the things for me is I have the experience of going through the budgets as a parent, and now I'm on the budget subcommittee. And for me, I have those skills to really focus in on numbers, but also large amounts of information and parse it down to what's really important. And I think that that's also very important. And that's something that we need to really, in the next 2 years particularly, really take a look at with our district and make sure we're doing that appropriately. Lastly, I think one of the things is Pittsburgh High School. It's we have 3,500 students there. We're already over capacity by just a little bit of students, but that's going to continue to increase. So we need to make sure to do robust, really surveying, meeting with community members, thinking outside the box to really get ideas of how we can address those needs. I think one of our biggest problems is, do we build more? Can we not build more? What money are we going to do that with? So really, one of the things that I'm going to be championing now as we move forward is creating a plan. Is probably going to start at the beginning of next year to really go out to our community to discuss how do we address that? What are we going to do moving forward? And then one of the things is, do we look at a bond? What do our parents think about that? I know that was brought up here recently, and I thought right now wasn't quite the right time to go ahead and do that simply because of what all of our parents are doing. But I think it's important to bring them all in the process, get all the information from our parents so that we can really make sure that they're all included and we get all these different ideas, because that's how we get the best ideas, Wolf, so that we can make sure to address this issue, because it is an issue and it's only going to grow. So we need to make sure to address it appropriately.
I agree. Now, as an appointed incumbent, you were appointed after the passing of Mr. Renovar, who
That's
was
correct.
an institution in Pittsburgh Unified School District.
He was a school board member when I was a student board member.
Yes. Now, a lot of times people, they run for office and they have ideas, dreams, visions. I'm going to change the world, and then they get in and reality hits. So as somebody who's already on the board, what are some things that you've learned that somebody who's not run for office maybe should think about?
Right. Well, one thing, you aren't the governing board by yourself. There's 5 members. They're the ones that make all the decisions. So what you have to do is you have to not only make compromises, but also be prepared to really explain your reasons for supporting one thing or the other, or why it is that you feel passionately about a certain policy or about a certain program and how it can help benefit our students. So you can be persuasive and convince your other board members. I think that that's first and foremost that a lot of people don't understand, thinking that, I can bring in everything. It's like, well, no, you're just one vote. There are 5 votes. You need 3 to pass anything. So I think that that's first and foremost. But above that, really letting them know that there's a lot of things that you can do, and that's in passing policies and really in the accountability sphere. You might say, oh yeah, well, the superintendent and all the staff, they do the how. They're the ones that institute how programs are going to be instituted, how policies are going to be implemented. But really, us as boards, we have to hold our staff and our schools accountable. And the way we do that is when all these programs come back, making sure, or before they're even approved, make sure that they have ways to measure their effectiveness, Wolf. And then once we have those ways, whenever these programs come back for renewal, make sure that we have that data that was promised to us initially to make sure that it is effective. I really believe in making data-driven decisions to really hold all of our staff accountable, and that's what I will continue to do. But also, really, the way you can do that is request presentations on different issues. For example, after the tragedy in Uvalde, I asked for a safety presentation on our safety plan in our district. Immediately afterwards, our district became proactive, put CRAs in all of our elementary schools, which we didn't have previously.
What's a CRA for those that
Yeah.
don't know?
So a CRA is a campus resource assistant. So what they do is that they help with security at the schools. Previously, we had them at our middle schools and at our high school, but now we've expanded that to have at least one at all of our elementary schools as well. So, and then with that plan, also really ways to institute greater training. We understood there's more training that needed to happen, especially at our elementary schools. That is now going to happen throughout this year. Another thing as well is we have a see something, say something program with Sandy Hook Promise. What it is, it's an application where students can anonymously say whenever something that they find that may be suspicious or scary that's going on that they hear, they can then alert staff about it. And I think that that's particularly important program because what we learned on the news from this Uvalde is that this student was on social media, before these things happened, saying things that were putting, pictures and making comments that were very suspicious. Also texting other students about that. I think a program like Sandy Hook Promise can help identify those things to our staff and hopefully address issues before they become tragedies the way they did. So I think that's one example, and my goal is to continue doing that. Another item that I requested that's going to be brought up to our board meetings is child nutrition services. I think that that's another important thing. We've heard from the community how, I think that that's something we need to look at, not only the type of food that we serve, but also trying to think outside the box of how do we ensure that all of our students get fed, at the appropriate times.
Pittsburgher?
Yeah. I like the Pittsburgher.
I do too.
Yeah. So I think that that's important. And the district's already started doing that. One of the things is now they're offering students that are 16 and over, they can earn money by working in food services during lunch and brunches, particularly at the high school, to help with that. So we can make sure that all of our students are fed in a timely manner. So trying to think outside the box, but also requesting that information so we can provide that guidance and, really give that what so that they can do the how, but then also have them bring that back so we can see if that how was effective, right?
Right. So you talked about that you're only one vote on a board of 5.
Right.
How do you feel you've worked with your peers, and what unique talents or assets do you feel you bring to the board?
Right. I think I've worked very well with the board. We don't always agree, but one of the key things for me is to always be respectful. I think it's very important to be respectful of divergent opinions, and that's not just on the board, but also with our community members. Making sure one of the biggest things for me is to listen, see what their reasoning is, but then also effectively communicate mine. I think that is something that I've really developed over the past 11 years plus of being an attorney, of really making sure to explain yourself appropriately, concisely, persuasively, providing information, but data to back up whatever information you're presenting and whatever ideas you're presenting. I think that that's what I bring to the board, and I think I've done well in doing that to our fellow board members, and I think I want to continue to go ahead and do that so we can bring that different perspective, which is very, very important. I think I've brought all those skills, and I want to continue to go ahead and do that because I think that's how we effectively provide the guidance and the policy for our district staff to then provide that education to our students. So that's, what I've brought, what I want to continue to bring. And then I just hope that voters have seen that, or if they haven't, they can come speak to me, speak to others that have been at board meetings that have seen me there. I feel pretty confident, even if people don't agree with all of the decisions that I've made on there, that at least they've seen that I'm engaged, I'm in all the information. I know what I'm talking about when I do speak, and that I genuinely care and want to provide the best for our students. And that's what I want to continue to do.
So, if voters, and we'll give you an opportunity to
Mm-hmm.
give closing remarks, but you brought up that you're open and that people
Mm-hmm.
can communicate with you. How can people reach you? What's the best contact information?
Yes, I mean, they can just call me on my cell phone. It's 619-669-5645. I'm willing to speak to anyone that would like to speak to me. Also, you can, if you want to send me an email, you can do that as well. You can reach me through my website, elioforschoolboard.com. And Elio spelled Helio. And then the four is the number four. Schoolboard.com. You can also send me a message that way. And I've already received messages from community members, and I try to respond as quickly as possible, as responsibly as possible. Also, you can reach me on Facebook there at Heliodoro Moreno. You can search me there on Facebook, and I'm willing to speak to anyone through that medium as well that has questions for me.
Awesome. Well, want to thank you for your time. I know you have a busy schedule, lots of different things, and want to give you an opportunity to basically answer the world famous question: why should people vote for you?
Yes, thank you, Wolf. People should vote for me because I have that vested interest here in Pittsburgh. I've a lifelong Pittsburgh resident. I love this city. I care for all of our students. I am a person that rolls up his sleeves and it gets into everything that we need to do in our district to make our education better. My priorities are accountability, equity, and safety of our students. I want to emphasize those things, and I want to make sure to partner with all of our parents, all of our groups to do the best that we can. I'm an active listener. Not only listen, but meaningfully consider the opinions of our community. I think that that's key, and that's what I will continue to do on the board. And then I hope that all of you will vote for me for a full 4-year term on the Pittsburgh School Board. Thank you. Thank you to the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Wolf, for doing this. And I hope to see everyone out there in the community. Thank you.
Well, we thank everybody for tuning in. Like I said, this is one of many candidate interviews. They will be available on the website www.pittsburgh.vote, and you can view all the candidates, the recordings of these interviews, as well as links to their Facebook pages and their websites if available. So, again, thank you, and thank you for supporting the Chamber of Commerce. Have a great day.